You are listening to the 10th broadcast of TBR Radio Presents the TBR History Hour, with your host, TBR contributing editor, Dr. Edward DeVries. In today's show, Dr. Ed talks with Harry Cooper. Harry is the founder of Sharkhunters and one of the world's foremost experts on German U-boats.
Well, I wish that I could say that I'm bringing you the first broadcast from our Maryland studio, but that's not entirely true. I am in Maryland right now. I am in the room that will be the studio, but we are so far away from having offices or a studio set up right now. It's not even funny. But I do have a microphone plugged into a laptop, and we are plugging along. I just edited a great interview. It was one of the last ones that I recorded down there in Florida. It was with a gentleman named Harry Cooper. He is the leader of a group called Sharkhunters. And a number of years ago, I had read a book that Harry had written called Hitler in Argentina. And I found it to be very interesting. And I said, this is a guy that I need to meet, need to talk to. This was even before I was doing radio. And the address on the book and the address for Sharkhunters was in Tampa, Florida. And I thought it's a few hours down there, but one of these days I'll make the trip down there and I'll set up a meeting. Well, come to find out, Harry lived about 10 to 15 minutes away from me, from our house there in the Ocala area of Florida. And I could have been eating breakfast with him all the time. There's a little restaurant there called Red's. And it was a place that my wife and I had always intended to go and try out, but we just never made it down there. But it was about an 8 or 9 minute drive from the house. And apparently Harry Cooper eats breakfast just about every morning there at Red's. And of course, we'll talk a little bit about that during the course of the interview. But Harry and I ended up having breakfast together. And then we ended up doing a radio show. And so I went ahead and I put that together today, did the editing on that, and it is our broadcast today. And I know you're going to enjoy it. I think that Harry may very well be, as far as if you're interested in things like German U-boats, which were the old German submarines, I think you'll find Harry was probably one of the most knowledgeable people in that field. And he does expeditions to South America. He does expeditions to Africa. He does expeditions to Asia. Not only looking for the old German U-boats, but looking for other artifacts from World War II and other periods of history as well. And just a very interesting person to talk to. And so you'll definitely enjoy today's TBR Radio Presents the TBR History Hour.
Did you enjoy your breakfast?
Oh, I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you.
Yep, so you and your wife got to stop there every now and again.
My wife's already in Maryland now, so I don't know if
Before you head for Maryland.
I say she's already in Maryland. We closed on the house a week ago Friday. And so she went up there, probably permanently, but she may have to come back here to Florida to sign papers when we sell the house here. And if that happens, then I'll definitely take her there for breakfast.
Yeah, heck yes.
So you eat there every day or just frequently or?
Almost every day. And if we miss there, they've got two other restaurants further into Hernando. They've got the burger station, which used to be an old gas station, which is good for burgers, but I'm kind of burnt out with burgers. And right across the street, they got a place called Bluegill's, which is a seafood place. They got great shrimp. My wife loves the scallops there. All around, it's just a darn good place. The guy who owns them all, we've known him since he was a 17-year-old kid washing dishes over at Stump Knockers, and he's now 40. And he and his wife are good, decent Christian people. They got 5 children or 6, I can't remember which. And them kids all work at the restaurant, during the summers, etc. So they show their kids that life isn't free. You got to work. You got to put forth an effort.
I've been to the burger restaurant because that burger station, that's where it's like an old gas station, and it's where 200 dead ends into 41, right?
Yep, that's correct. And that corner where the two come together, it's so beautifully landscaped. Shane did that on his own to make the area look nice. But right across the road from that is where you'll find Bluegill's.
In your last newsletter, you had mentioned a German restaurant nearby. Is it the Old World restaurant, or is there another restaurant I've not known about?
No, the closest German restaurant to us now is in Mount Dora. They had a real nice one in Ocala, but they closed down, unfortunately.
Okay,
the one
yeah.
in Mount Dora.
Yeah, we used to eat there.
It's really good.
Okay, yeah, we used to eat there at the one in Ocala until it closed. We used to love to go there. But do you know where the Old World restaurant is on 41 when you're heading towards Brooksville?
Yeah, way south. Way south.
Yeah.
Gee, I'm trying. Yeah, it's on the west side of the road, south of Highway 48 in Floral City.
Yeah. So I was wondering if that was the one, because they've got really good German food there. The lady that owns it, that runs it.
Okay, I can't tell you because.
Yeah, because the lady that runs that's an old German lady. Yeah, that's a really good restaurant. And the prices are really affordable, too. They make their own breads. They make their own soups.
Oh, okay. We haven't been there in probably 20 years because it's clear at the other side of the county. So it's like 30 miles from here.
Right.
And that's a long way to go for lunch.
Let's go ahead and I want to start here. Tell us how you came to know and become friends with our TBR founder, Willis Carto.
Yeah, Willis. He was a great guy. I think it was 1989. He answered an ad that we had in one of the major military-type magazines. I think it was World War II. And he joined, and he joined as W.A. Carto. And he said, I probably don't want to mention his full name because it would cause us problems because he was rather right-wing. So I said, I really don't care who likes or dislikes any of our members. So Willis and I got to be good friends after that. Way back then, we lived in Tampa, and he had a radio station in St. Petersburg. And there were times he would come to town to do whatever he had to do with his radio station. And he and I and my family, we'd meet at there was a nice Cuban restaurant near us in Tampa. We would always meet there for dinner. In 1990, we moved up here to Citrus County, and he got rid of his radio station for whatever reason. Still, whenever he'd come down to Jacksonville, I think he had relatives there or holdings or something. Anyhow, he'd let us know, and we'd buzz on across the state to meet him on the balcony of the A1A Ale House, and we'd have burgers, and I had a Coke. I gave up drinking years ago. And he was just a great guy. He was a good friend.
And so we talked a little bit this morning. Of course, our listeners weren't privy to our breakfast conversation, but we had talked a little bit earlier about how you had started Sharkhunters. And tell us a little bit about that story. But before you do that, tell us what you did in the Air Force, and then tell us how an Air Force guy gets interested in submarines.
Yeah, that's an interesting story. As I said, I was born one day after the German troops marched into Poland, and I was a kid during the whole war years. And of course, we had all the propaganda. Germans were all horrible Nazis and murdered people just for fun. Because you have to make your people believe that the other guys are horrible. Otherwise, nobody could kill each other, and that you couldn't have a war. So I had always wanted to be a fighter pilot. And I got out of high school, went right into the Air Force, not realizing that the day of the 19-year-old fighter pilot was gone. I spent 6 months in intensive training for thermonuclear weapons. And I was put in command of a 6-man team loading hydrogen bombs onto heavy bombers. When I was almost 21, I took all the proper exams. I was the only guy out of 30 to pass the first day of 2 hard days of exams. I got almost perfect scores on everything, so okay, fine. I said to my career counselor, great, when do I start Air Cadets? And he said, forget it. He says, you'll never be a pilot. I said, what? I've qualified. And he said, yeah, but we've got so many pilots left over from World War II and Korea. They said, we've shut down Air Cadets. And then I realized my squadron commander, who should have been a major or maybe a lieutenant colonel, was a full bird colonel with command pilot wings. And every place you looked, there were bird colonels everywhere with wings. So they were just pigeonholing these guys until they got their 20 years in and out the door. So at the end of my hitch, I decided, no, if I can't be a fighter pilot, that's it. So I got out, went to school, got my degree in business administration, then had my regular, normal lifestyle, mortgage, car financed. I also was driving race cars, and I moved up to the big track, and I would spend Sunday afternoons at 190 miles an hour on the super speedways. Then 1976, July, the Texas 500, which was the bicentennial of the United States. I was in the lead group with great drivers like A.J. Foyt, Bobby Unser, Al Unser, Gordy Johncock, and we were having a great time down there at Texas World Speedway, buzzing around at 190 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden my engine blew up. And then on the way back to Chicago, where I lived at the time, the engine in my hauler truck blew up. I was a really good driver. I was not a very good engine builder, apparently. So I got back to work and found that my boss had quit, and a guy who was a real jerk, well, my boss, I said, that's it. I quit my job, sold everything I owned, bought a 30-foot sailing yacht, put an ad in a boating magazine for female crew/companion. Remember, this was the 70s. And I got over 200 replies, and I whittled it down and left Chicago with a blonde, a brunette, and a redhead that were 24, and 25 years old, and I was 40. Sailed off to the Bahamas. And the best part about that trip was there was no stress. You want to go swimming? Yeah, maybe later, maybe now, maybe whatever. You want to go to the next island? Tomorrow or next week, next month. So there was no stress, and stress kills. And one of the islands we bumped into was a round island as opposed to the normal Bahamas that are straight, long, straight, narrow islands. And this one had been a plantation during the war years, and I found the ruins of a mansion on the hilltop. And so I asked this old caretaker, what was the story? And he said that during the war years, they were an operating plantation, and they gave fresh water and food to German U-boats. And my first thought was those dirty Nazis, because that's what we were taught. Okay, so I tucked it in the back of my head because it was not important at that time, and I kept on sailing, and one by one the girls went back, different ones had come out, etc. And finally one day, I put my hand in my wallet, and I had $5 left. I was in southern Bahamas, so I sailed all the way back to the Florida Keys, to Key Largo, put my boat into storage to a marina, and here I am out on Highway 1, former vice president of a company. I'm hitchhiking back to Chicago. Got there, mooched a room from my sister, and went back to work as a corporate executive, and I started studying the U-boats. And it turns out this story about machine gunning people in the water, that was propaganda. Never happened. But you have to hate the enemy. And then I realized that these guys were young, patriotic Germans, like I was a young, patriotic American when I joined. They had the worst attrition rate of any military ever in history. As a comparison, the United States Navy submarine service lost one man out of 7, the worst attrition of any American military in the war. So 1 man out of 7 is a horrible, horrible loss. But on the German side, it was the reverse. 1 man out of 7 came home. And I just thought it was wrong to paint these honorable, decent young warriors with a false brush that they were horrible murderers and all that sort of stuff. So that's why I started. They were not Nazis, because Admiral Dönitz would not let them belong to any political party. And the Nazis was the anglicized version of NSDAP, which was the National Socialist German Workers' Party. They used the regular military salute rather than the stretched out arm until the July 1944 attempted assassination of Hitler in the Wolf's Lair. then they had political officer on board, etc. But many of these political officers somehow fell overboard out at the middle of the ocean. They were not well loved. So anyhow, that's it in a nutshell. And we put an ad in some of the military magazines, 1983, 84, 85, like that. And wow, we blossomed up to where now we're up to member number 8,300, minus those who have passed on, and unfortunately a lot have passed on. But that's Shark Hunters in a nutshell.
Open your web browser and type in www.barnesreview.org and discover the Barnes Review magazine. In the Barnes Review, you will read vignettes of man, from the prehistoric to the very recent, from forgotten races and civilizations to first-person accounts of World War II and the late Cold War. There is no more interesting magazine published today, nor a more significant and important subject than real history. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review. You can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review magazine in its print form, or in convenient electronic delivery. Our host has been a subscriber to both formats for years. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review.
Tell us exactly what Shark Hunters is, what Shark Hunters does.
Shark Hunters is the first and the largest and the only official source of information on the German U-boats of World War II. Outside of Germany, we've got the largest archive. As I told you, we had to buy the house next door to store all our files and photos and original letters from so many. And we were fortunate that we started this in 1983 when so many of the survivors were still living. Otto Kretschmer, the top submarine commander of the war, he was on my board of advisors. I had a sleeping room in his house. He and his wife welcomed me into their family. Eric Topp, the guy who sank the first ship in American waters, I've been to his house I don't know how many times. He's been over here. Hans-Georg Hess, the youngest combat submarine commander of the war, 4 months past his 21st birthday, they gave him a submarine and told him, go on out and die. He became a doctor of law after the war. He's been here to visit several times. I've been in his home in Europe more times than I can remember, and the list goes on and on and on. On the American side, the 4 Medal of Honor winning submarine commanders were all members. Admiral Fluckey was the most highly decorated American submariner ever in history with the Medal of Honor, 4 Navy Crosses, et cetera, et cetera. He was a visitor here in my home. I visited him up in Annapolis. He was on our board of advisors. Ronald Reagan, the greatest president of our lifetime until now, he was a member from 1991 until his passing. He awarded me the Medal of Merit, and I've got an American flag he sent me that I fly on special occasions. So there again, the list goes on and on. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of veterans from all sides are members. We tell the story of the German U-boat activities honestly, without propaganda, without prejudice, or without a lot of baloney.
And so in the Shark Hunters newsletter and some of your Shark Hunters publications, you talk about expeditions that you're leading. And, you know, you're taking people to go find archives and to go find artifacts and just to go explore some places that have been reported. Like, for example, you were talking about one of the houses that Adolf Hitler was reported to have lived in South America after the war, and you actually took a group of people there to see the house and to see some of the buildings, like a hotel, for example, you'd mentioned, where Joseph Mengele, you know, had stayed and so forth and lived. You know, tell us about those expeditions and how you got into doing that and why you do them, and, you know, maybe just some of the things that you've uncovered in those trips.
Okay, in a 1-hour show.
Yes.
That's going to require a little compressing. Yeah, I've been to the home where Hitler lived in Argentina for 10 years after the war, from 1945 to 55. It's a place called Inalco. I was there in 2008, 2009. Last November I was there. I was there a couple other times in between. And I brought a group there again this past November. And unlike other years, this time we had the run of the place, plus the farm that's attached about 500 yards away. We had the run of the place
we never take anything. Boy, we're hardcore about that. You never mess with anything. You never take anything. You take all the photos you want, take all the video you want, but you leave everything in place. We actually stayed overnight in the guest house right next to the manor house where Hitler and Eva Braun had stayed for 10 years after their escape. We got into this because we are the world experts on the U-boat history. And then we found during our research that U-boats were making a run to Argentina routinely to a place called Caleta de los Loros, which means Parrot Cove, which is at the northwestern corner of Golfo San Matias, St. Matthew's Gulf. And they'd be coming in with agents to put ashore to work, bringing home other agents. They'd be bringing in equipment like radio equipment primarily, and also precious metals to pay people off and to also support the spies down there. And then we found that they had brought a lot of the leaders of the Third Reich, including Martin Bormann. And then we found that Hitler escaped down there as well. But unlike this foolish TV series that was copied from a book that is equally as pitiful, Hitler did not go there on board U-530. The man was extremely claustrophobic, violently seasick. So to think he's going to be bobbing around in a tiny little skinny steel tube that stunk of body odor, diesel fuel, green mold, to think he was going to bob around for 2 months, 3 months in one of those things, it just stretches the imagination. We know how he got down there. It's all revealed in my book, Hitler and the Secret Alliance, which is available from Sharkhunters, sharkhunters.com. I mean, the book is hardcore proof. He did not go by submarine. We were at, as I told you this morning, my guide and I were at the actual place where he landed. We had a handwritten chart that one of our people in Europe had dug out of old files, sent a copy to us. We followed the chart and exactly where he landed. And it was exactly as it was described on the chart. And then the nearby German village, I remembered the name now, Colonia de 18 April, the colony that was built on the 18th of April, or maybe it was 19th. I don't have my files in front of me. And it had been a thriving German farming community from the middle and late 1920s. Things apparently had gone on hard times. Most of the men had died of old age, whatever, leaving only the widows. And they were living in pretty sad poverty. But each widow we talked to along that area remembers hearing that airplane land. Then we talked to the owner of the estancia where it did land, the daughter of the owner. And although she was not born for 3 more years after that plane landed, she and her husband kind of nervously laughed when I asked about it. And, oh no, that never happened. Sounding a lot like, oh no, that never happened. And then she did admit that some people had called the prefect of police, which is the highest police officer in that area, and reported seeing an airplane land. So the prefect of police came out to investigate and found, according to her, it was only one little crop duster airplane. Baloney. It was that 6-engine Ju-390, and it brought Hitler and several other people. They had flown to Norway. The plane was painted Swedish Air Force blue with their markings, and then they flew nonstop down to Uruguay and landed in this on this estancia near a little town called Paysandú. Nice place down there. I really love going down to South America.
You know, you had mentioned that Hitler had had stayed there in Argentina for 10 years. So did Hitler die in 1955 or tell us the post-war Hitler outcome?
Okay, 1955 was the Argentine uprising that ousted Juan Perón. He had to run off to Spain. He was the protector of all the guys from the Third Reich because getting paid tons of money from Martin Bormann, who had control of the purse strings. 1955, when he got knocked out of office, the protection for all these guys went away too. And they scattered. Some went deeper into Argentina. Others, like Hitler, emigrated north, and they bounced around between Paraguay, Brazil, Bolivia. Some went to Chile. Not many went to Uruguay because Uruguay was still very pro-British. But they bounced around from place to place. And Hitler ultimately died in Bolivia on 10th of February, 1962 at 3 p.m. in Bolivia.
So how do you know that Hitler died on that day? What proof? I mean, how did you come to that conclusion?
Wasn't a conclusion. It was what I was told by somebody who was there. This person I'm going to see next week, he was born 1940 in Berlin, and when everything collapsed, his mother took him down to Bolivia where they had a coffee plantation. Hitler came to visit in January of 62, and according to this fella, Hitler was in really rough shape. And then they learned from other people down there that Hitler had died at 3 p.m. on that afternoon that I mentioned in February of 62. You know, that he was, I guess that was, he was 75 years old, something like that, because he was born in 1889. And we had information that Eva Braun was still alive in 2002, which is no big deal because that would have made her 90 years old. People live to 90 all the time, and even on. I'm planning to live beyond 90.
So did you get this information about Eva after she would have died then, or was she still living at that time when you got the information?
She would have been dead because we got the information probably about 5 years ago.
Okay, so then there was no effort or no
we
way
hear
to
rumors
try
that
to.
she might have been.
So then there would have been no need to even try to
find
follow
her?
up on
No.
that or try to meet her or spot her or anything. But that is definitely
Correct.
interesting. So you had told me at breakfast that you probably knew more about the post-war outcome of Hitler than just about anybody right now. Why is that? I mean, what makes you that authority? I'm not questioning it. I'm just asking, what is it that makes you that authority?
Go ahead and question all you like. I'll back up anything I say. Several reasons. First off, I do this at least 12 hours a day. I'm usually in my office by 3, 4 o'clock in the morning at the latest, and I go till about 7 o'clock at night. My wife just had a conversation with me yesterday that I better spend more time with the family, and she's right. But also, we have developed a network of members in 77 countries. Some are researchers, serious researchers. Some are professional historians. Some are retired spooks working for different intel agencies. Some are current spooks right now still working for intel agencies. And we have gotten a lot of files that people haven't been able to see just yet.
And, I know that Sharkhunters
and
is
we never say anything. We never claim anything unless I can back it up.
Okay.
We don't, unlike some of these Johnny-come-lately websites about so-called U-boat history, all they do is bat theories and fairy tales around. They don't have absolute facts. We did because, like I say, in the beginning, we were in contact with hundreds of U-boat commanders, officers, and crewmen. Not just on a surface kind of contact, but these were friends. They've been to my house, I've been to their house, and they gave us freely of their information.
Right.
So it's not somebody's idea, not somebody's theory, not somebody's fairy tale. It's hard fact, or I don't put it down.
Well, I know that Sharkhunters is into a lot of things, even that go beyond U-boats. And even, I could see, like, for example, the Hitler post-war story, how that connects to U-boats. But there are a lot of things that you're investigating and that you're reporting on that even go outside of the scope of that. For example, your last newsletter, you had an article in there about a former NASA engineer and, his meetings with people like even, for example, Jackie Gleason, who would claim to have spotted UFOs and things. Is there a connection there that maybe I'm not seeing, or, how did your interests venture out into the other areas?
That's a good question. I'm on the radio every month with Rents Radio, and this fellow you're speaking about, Clark McClelland, had been 35 years with NASA, and he has some incredible stories as you know, because you're kind of related there are guys in NASA that have stories that they won't talk about. And unfortunately for Clark, he talked about them. He wrote a 32-chapter book that he can't get published, but he's revealing an awful lot of these secrets about the UFOs and lots of others. 35 years as a lead engineer with NASA, he doesn't get a pension. His pension has disappeared because he talked too much. I visited him last month, I think it was. He's in a so-called assisted living facility, which is really just a giant warehouse for people waiting to die, with 2 guys in each room. But he gave me his whole story on disk drive. He's laying there in bed. He'll never get out of that room until they carry him out. He's only got 1 leg left because he had gangrene. So you get punished when you tell stories you're not supposed to tell. So that's how we got involved. He and I did some radio shows together with Rense Radio. And he used to live about 40 miles from me, so we'd meet for lunch every so often at a really great German restaurant in Mount Dora, Florida. But now he's in another state in that assisted living facility. I talked to him on the phone last night.
So I've got to ask you the question, because every time I've just happened to be down in Mount Dora and I've tried to go to that restaurant, they never have a table. So have you just been able to go in there, or have you made reservations in advance?
I never make reservations.
Okay.
I remember the last time I was there, they told me it'll be at least 1 hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I told a nice old lady, I says, ich möchte meine Mittagessen schnell bitte. Oh, you speak German? Okay, fine. So we have a table over here. So we got in that way.
Okay, yeah. One
nice
time
lady,
I went in there.
Awesome food.
And they claimed they were having a private party, and I didn't think so. But anyways, yeah, I've never actually been able to get in there to eat, but I've heard that it is a really good restaurant.
It is a very good restaurant. You just need to be a little more pushy.
Extra, read all about it. If you're like me, and I'll bet you are, you like to be on the cutting edge of honest news and accurate information. 26 times a year, the American Free Press newspaper can be delivered to your door, packed with the kind of uncensored news that I know you're going to appreciate. If you're ever dissatisfied with your subscription to the American Free Press, their guarantee is that you just drop them an email and they will gladly refund the unused portion of your subscription. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.americanfreepress.net. Once again, www.americanfreepress.net. And find out about the American Free Press. Do it today. Extra, read all about it.
Of all the shark hunter stories you can tell, well, let me ask you this question. You had mentioned that Ronald Reagan was one of the early members. And of course, the former president is dead now, so there's you'd probably be at more liberty to talk about that now that he's passed. Tell us how Ronald Reagan came to be a member and what your relationship was with Reagan and what was his interest in all of this.
He was very interested in history, and he didn't come to us. I went to him. I still remember his address, 668 St. Cloud Drive or whatever, because when they bought that ranch, the address was 666 on St. Cloud, but 666 is not an acceptable number, so he had the address changed. And we wrote back and forth a few times. He awarded me the Medal of Merit, the Congressional Medal, the Presidential Medal of Merit, which is right there. And
Wow.
He sent me an American flag that I put up on special occasions. He was interested in history primarily, and there's a picture of him on our website, sharkhunters.com, with a quote that he made. He said, thanks to organizations like Shark Hunters that preserve American history. He was a great man, and I was happy to have him aboard.
So were there any other celebrity members, and I realize there may be some right now that you don't feel at liberty to disclose their names, others who maybe they've passed on, or else you just know that you could, mention their name and it not have any reprisal for them or upset them in any way? What other maybe, names could you throw out there that people would recognize?
On the Navy side, just way too many. The 4 Medal of Honor winning American submarine commanders were members. Well, that must. Oh, geez, That's the NASA engineer calling, Clark McClellan.
If you need to take that call, we can pause and I can go back to this in a second.
No.
Okay.
No, not a problem. The 4 Medal of Honor winning American submarine commanders were members. One, Admiral Fluckey, was the most highly decorated American submariner ever with the Medal of Honor, 4 Navy crosses, and just rows and rows of ribbons. He was a guest here in my house. I visited him in Annapolis. Ned Beach, the guy who wrote many books, but the most famous was Run Silent, Run Deep, which was made into a movie in the 50s. I was up to visit him in Annapolis. He was on one of our tours with us. On the Russian side, Я вас почетный русский подводник. I'm an honorary Russian submarine officer. And a guy who still is a member was Fleet Admiral Vladimir Chernevin, the last supreme commander of the Soviet Navy. He was ordered by Mikhail Gorbachev to invite me to Moscow, which he did. Here I am, a Florida boy, showing up in Moscow in December 1991. I had no warm clothes at all. I had to borrow a heavy top coat. He was a member, still is a member. Several of the Russian top admirals still members. I was over there 4 times. 4 times, I think, to Russia. Beautiful place. St. Petersburg is an incredibly magnificent city. On the English side, he's gone now, but Tommy Gold, who was the last living recipient of the Victoria Cross, which is even harder to get than the Medal of Honor, which incidentally, there's no such thing as the Congressional Medal of Honor. If you mention that, like I did to Gene Fluckey about the Congressional Medal of Honor, oh my God, he about came out of his chair. There's no such thing as Congressional Medal of Honor. Congress has nothing to do with it. It's the Medal of Honor. Okay, Gene. Mm-hmm. Several radio personalities, state senators. Al D'Amato was a member for a while. I mean, they came to us, and they sent their, back then it was $35. Now it's $50 a year to get the magazine. Not a newsletter, Ed. It's a magazine.
Okay.
And as a member, they get members get special discounts on our books. Save $5 on each book. We've got 29 books in print already. And on our tours, they get discount of $200 each for themselves and their guests, and they get information nobody else can get. Also, when they need questions answered, members come to us and we answer the questions for them. No charge. It's part of membership. Other places, other archives, etc., when you have a question, you're going to have to send them $20, $30, $40 for them to look it up. So I just don't think that's ethical. You can go to the website, sharkhunters.com, and see all the benefits. And as I told you, I'm putting you on as an honorary member for the first year. And after that, if you like it, renew. If you don't like it, then just don't do nothing, and it'll disappear.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I look forward to that. And just kind of to let our listeners know, as I'd mentioned earlier, you and I met for breakfast this morning. And for whatever reason, maybe because the literature that I had the old Tampa address on it from however many years ago, I just assumed you were down in Tampa, and you were always on my list of people. It's like I'm going to set up a meeting with this guy one day. And then we started talking here the other day by email, and come to find out you live about 15 minutes away from me, and we could have been eating breakfast, on a regular basis.
Yeah, we've been here for 30 years in this location. We wouldn't, as I say, my son, just an incredible young man, but he's special needs, and they have a place here in Citrus County called the Key Training Center, which is for people with special needs and is about the best in the country. We just moved here out of sheer chance, and then we found out this place. And my son, who the so-called experts, when he was a little guy, said he'd never be able to be potty trained or feed himself, he lives with us, and he'll never be more than about 4'10", but the kid functions like anybody else. He's got his own set of cooking ware here. He cooks his snacks. If I cook, people die, so he's ahead of me on that. Yeah. And he works He's got a job right now, Monday, Thursday, and Friday. He works in a thrift store, got his own little department. Tuesdays, he does Meals on Wheels. So that's why we live here, and I can't imagine ever. And look out! I'm looking out the window right now, Ed. Gorgeous sunny day, 80 degrees, and you know what I was driving when I met you this morning, my vintage Corvette that I've had for 20 years, and it's a top-down kind of day. This is Florida. You couldn't pull me out of Florida with dynamite out my door. Never.
Okay.
I lived in Chicago for a lot of years. Nice place, great culture, great restaurants, awfully expensive, and some of the most corrupt politicians. And I was a rare Chicago, and I was a Chicago Republican. And I don't own a snow shovel anymore. I don't own heavy clothes anymore. Chicago is a nice place to visit, and that's it now. I'm not leaving Florida.
Hello, I'm Tom Strain, Lieutenant Commander-in-Chief of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. The Confederate flag, Confederate symbols, and the reputation of our Confederate ancestors has come under attack. The Sons of Confederate Veterans is actively fending off our detractors, but there is only so much that we can do. We need your help. Contact your local, state, and national elected politicians and tell them that you will not tolerate these attacks on our heritage. You can also visit scv.org, download an application to join us in our fight to preserve our Southern heritage. Visit scv.org today. If you don't have a Confederate ancestor and you are tired of American history disappearing, you can assist us by becoming a friend of the SCV. Please visit scvheritagedefense.org and make a donation to the Heritage Defense Fund. We hope that you will join us in the fight to defend the Confederate soldiers' good name.
So let's go back to Hitler for a minute. Tell me what happened. How did Hitler get out of the bunker? How did he evade detection and all of those things? And what really happened in the bunker? Because obviously the official story didn't happen.
Well, exactly right. That's very, very lengthy, and I'm not going to tie up your time for a 4-hour dissertation. And we have a book coming out about that too.
Plug the book for a second if you want to.
Okay, well, we've got 3 books already in the Hitler Escape series. Hitler in Argentina, which is a bestseller, and it tells documented proof how he got away, got to South America. Then the next one is Hitler and the Secret Alliance, which explains how it was so easy for all these escaping Germans to just melt right into Argentina. And then the third one is Hitler's spy web in South America, and the title is pretty descriptive. This next one goes into even more detail. We found a castle over there. I mean, we didn't find. One of our members told us about it. 1943, when the bombing raids on Munich accelerated, and this was Nazi Party headquarters, and all the records were kept in a place called the Brown House, and it was in danger of getting blown up, which it eventually did. But they took all the party records out of there and moved them to this castle, and I'm not going to name the castle or where it's located for obvious reasons, but they put all the files there. Then Sunday, the 22nd of April, 1945, an old lady, Frau Schmidbauer, was in her big, huge potato field turning potatoes. You got to turn them over, I guess. I wouldn't know. But she was out there working in the fields, and she hears the drone of aircraft, which was strange because the war was not in their area. It was farming country. You don't bomb farms. And she sees 3 Fiesler Storch aircraft coming in. These were small little 2-seater airplanes, similar to our Piper Cub. And they landed in the field across the street. And a limo and a staff car drove out, and they picked up the people off the airplanes, and they drove right past Frau Schmidbauer within 3 feet of where she was standing at the side of the road, and she looked right at Hitler, and he looked right at her. He went into this castle because he had to retrieve some documents, and he left quite some time later, and then wound up in another town called Nussdorf, where this American POW who's been in the news said that he saw him. And then now, where did he go from there? Most people, there are probably 10 people living who know this. He went to Salzburg, and the fighting was still going on even after the 8th of May, which was the surrender date. And he and some of his high-ranking people were in Salzburg, meeting with representatives of the Allies, primarily the United States, to arrange his escape. The U.S. allowed him to escape. And so finally, just, let's see, they had some of the best Waffen-SS divisions holding back the Red Army there, and then he was able to fly out and go down to South America. Why? You know, when I tell people this, they look absolutely incredulous. And they say, well, if they knew he was in South America, why didn't they go after him? And I ask them, well, who's they? Well, Israel. Why didn't Israel go after him? And I tell them there was no such place as Israel in 1945. It didn't come into being until late 47, early 48. Oh, well, what about the Mossad? Well, if you don't have Israel, you don't have Mossad. And then you could see the light come on over their head. What about the United States? Okay, we've heard the term quid pro quo quite a bit lately with the phony impeachment thing, and also Joe Biden, they call him quid pro quo Joe. But back then, it works too. There was a quid pro quo in place. We believe, that's my theory, and I think it's pretty obvious. My career field was thermonuclear weapons, and I was in intensive study from January to June of 1958. And the first week or so of our training, we watched films of the American nuclear program from its inception, and we were not doing very well. The Japanese test fired their first weapon a week before we test fired our first weapon. The Japanese had no more fissionable material. We were very, very low. And the problem was with us, we were having problems with the triggering mechanism. Now, to make an atom bomb go off, and you have to have an atom bomb, atomic bomb, to detonate a thermonuclear or hydrogen bomb, because you need the heat. So anyhow, to get the atom bomb, like Hiroshima, it's not Hiroshima, that's a new liberal pronunciation, it's Hiroshima. To get that bomb to go off, you have a ball of enriched uranium about the size of a large orange or a small grapefruit, and it's surrounded by 64 charges that are shaped charges, so they blast inward. Comp B and baritol, if you want to look them up. But they have to go off at the same exact millizillionth of a second to crush in and make it hypercritical. Triggers go off at the exact same zillionth of a second to create a critical mass, and then you have big, massive explosions and wipe out all of Hiroshima. But we were having troubles with the triggers. As the surrender order went out, there was a huge, big German cargo submarine, U-234, which had been a mine layer, but they took out the mine tubes and made it a cargo sub, and it was on its way to Japan. And they got caught in the North Atlantic when the surrender order came out, so they surrendered at Portsmouth, New Hampshire. On board, they had a strange collection. They had a Luftwaffe lieutenant general with his staff. They were going to go to Tokyo and revamp the Air Force over there. They had a Navy judge who was going to have court-martial trials on some of the spies that they had caught. They had two Japanese officers, both had the same rank of Captain Lieutenant, and one was a torpedo expert. I forget the other one. They were both experts in something. They killed themselves on board the boat because Japan was still at war with the United States, so they felt it would be just horrible to be surrendered to Americans. So they killed themselves, not by cutting out their innards in the old harakiri way, but they just took a lot of phenobarbital and died painfully. And they had a guy named Dr. Heinz Schlicka, who later became a member of Sharkhunters. He was the world's leading expert in infrared trigger devices. And suddenly, after the surrender, our scientists got real smart, and the bomb went off over Hiroshima, and the rest is history. There was also 560 kilos of uranium on board that submarine. That's about 1,200 pounds.
So what's the question that I should have asked you and I haven't asked you? What was it that you wanted to talk about and didn't get the chance?
Are you kidding? We only had 2 hours of breakfast. I told you we could go for days and days and days and never go over the same subject twice. I do this 12 hours a day, at least 12 hours a day, almost 7 days a week. That's why I'm catching a problem from my wife. I'm not spending enough time with my family, and she's absolutely correct. So we're going to start taking weekends off. You'll be getting my magazine from now on, and you'll be getting daily updates, hot mails as we call them. So anytime you come up with a question, just let me know. Various hardcore truisms. One, German U-boaters were not mass murderers. They were not miserable people. They were just, for the most part, all the German military was honorable, with the possible question of the Allgemeine SS. You say SS, and right away your conditioned response is to go, ooh, sneer, snarl, and all that. Well, there were two SS groups. One was the Allgemeine SS. The Allgemeine SS reported to Heinrich Himmler. They were the camp guards, etc., the ones you see in the nasty films. But then there was the Waffen SS, which were the toughest combat troops of the war. I've talked to American veterans who fought against the Waffen SS, and they had nothing but great respect for these guys because they were honorable soldiers and they didn't know when to quit. They had the worst attrition rate of any of the foot soldiers because they just didn't quit. They kept coming and coming and coming. But you say SS and your conditioned response, ooh, terrible, nasty. But the Waffen SS were not that way. So we could talk about the Waffen SS. We could talk about the U-boaters. We could talk about we talked a little bit about the flying disc program, the Hannibus, Antarctica. That's a one great big question mark. You know, lots of people have theories. Oh, Hitler escaped down to Antarctica. No, he didn't. He went to South America. Mm-hmm. Oh, there's a Nazi base down there today. No, I don't think so. But when we tried to get an expedition going down there, as I told you, everything was fine. Everything was handshake and ready to go. And then suddenly the walls went up. And my associate over there in Monte Carlo, Monaco, she was arrested and beaten to hell by what she called was the Monaco secret police. They killed her dog. So I guess we're not welcome down there. And, I can put together an expedition to South America for about $5,000. I can get around fine. I don't speak Spanish, but I speak German well enough to get along in those little towns where they still speak German. And worst comes to worst, you get thrown out by the police. $500,000 is what's needed to mount a good expedition to the Antarctic. And I wouldn't even mind trying to sneak in without permission, but you got to have a tremendous amount of money just to get you down there, your support, everything. Plus, it's cold. Right. I could live with it, I suppose, if we had the wherewithal. But so the expeditions, the tours, which we call patrols. One of our members, who was a German U-boater, a skipper, he said, don't call them tours. You must call them patrols. Okay, they're patrols. We're this year, if anybody wants to find out, go to sharkhunters.com or send me an email, sharkhunters@sharkhunters.com. We are going to Berlin and northern Germany. We're going to places where other people can go. We're also going to places where it's off limits, and only because we know the right people, we're allowed in. That's the last couple of days of August into September for 2 weeks. And excuse me. Then in November, we're going back down to Argentina, and we're going to the estate where Hitler lived for 10 years after the war. We're going to other important places in Buenos Aires, and it's pure history. These nitwits at the Southern Poverty Law Center, which we refer to as the Spitlickers, they want to make it out as it's a fawning Nazi tour. No, it ain't. If we went to the Colosseum, would we be fascist Italians? No. Would we be Romans? No. So, they'll do anything to keep the cash register ringing, and that's the ball game with them.
Right. Well, I do appreciate you chatting with us today, and I think what we need to do is some point after I get moved up to Maryland, we need to schedule another interview, and we'll do another hour that can air, at a later date sometime.
Sounds like a plan. I'm here, except when I'm out in the field. Like I say, next week I'll be talking to a fella who lived this history, and he's got a lot to tell us.
Well, I'll look forward to that next conversation. So I appreciate breakfast again this morning. Thank you. It was wonderful, and enjoyed the fellowship as well. And I look forward to talking to you again here at some point here in the next couple months.
Sounds like a plan. Sharkhunters.com for your listeners.
Yes, sir. For our YouTube viewers, we'll even put that up on the screen for them so that they can read that. And I will catch you next time. Thank you again, Harry.
Right. My pleasure.
Yes,
have
sir.
a good day. God bless you.
Breaker one. Might be crazy, but I ain't dumb. Crazy cooter coming at you. Hey, y'all. Got your ears on? Well, I got some news for you. We're here at our brand new Cooters in the Country store in Sperryville, Virginia. Good old Sperryville, where Cooters started many years ago. Folks are coming from all over Hazard County, and we're going to have a grand old time with good music, good food, and best of all, good friends. Hope y'all can be there. Whoop, whoop, here come Enos. Huck got Cletus with him. I'm down and I'm gone.
And that is all the time that we're going to have for this week's TBR Radio Presents the TBR History Hour. I trust that you enjoyed our conversation with Harry Cooper. He was a wonderful person to sit down and have breakfast with. In fact, if I were remaining in Florida, I'd probably make that a weekly occasion. And also, just a great guy to talk to, and I know you enjoyed listening to him on the radio. He's just the stuff that he's done and that he's been into through the years is truly amazing. I'd like to encourage you to go to his website there and look up Sharkhunters International and see what they are doing. Maybe even consider becoming a member of Sharkhunters. As Harry had mentioned during the broadcast, he made me an honorary member for a year. And so he sent me my membership kit, my membership number, and I've been getting the Sharkhunters magazine. And it's just some great reading material, and it's just some really neat stuff there. And I've just been scrolling through all the videos and all the different things available on the Sharkhunters website. And I'm definitely glad that he has blessed me with this membership. And I know that you would enjoy being a member of Sharkhunters as well. So I would like to encourage you to do that. I would also like to encourage you to go to www.barnesreview.org. Go to the Barnes Review website and find out how you can become a subscriber to the Barnes Review magazine if you have not already done so. The March-April issue of the Barnes Review magazine has just come out, and Lord willing, next week we'll talk with Paul Angel, executive editor of the Barnes Review, about all of the articles that are in that great magazine. I will say this, the lead article, the cover article, has to do with climate change, or rather the fact that the history of the whole climate change hoax that has been perpetuated upon the United States and upon the world by the powers that be. You'll definitely find that this is a must-read issue, especially if you want to put a lot of political stupidity into a proper context and understanding. Finally, I'd like to encourage you to go to my website, www.dixieheritage.net, and when you're there, you can sign up to get my free newsletter each and every week by email. And when you do, I will also send you a free copy of my book, The Truth About the Confederate Battle Flag. There is no cost for you to receive either, no obligation for you to do anything whatsoever. You just have to provide us with a valid email address so that we can make the delivery. Well, from all of us here at TBR Radio presents the Dixie Heritage Hour. As always, it is our privilege, our honor, it's a blessing to us to be able to serve you in this capacity, and we look forward to doing it again next week. So until then, God bless. See you soon.